Hey everybody, it's Francesca Maxime, and this is another WiseGirl. We are still at the end of December 2016, about to launch into the new year, and looking forward to it because everybody wants an opportunity for renewal and looking ahead. The real thing, though, is that we have at every moment, not even just at the beginning of every day or at the beginning of every hour or at the beginning of every month or week, every single moment we have is an opportunity for renewal, for an opening, for an opportunity to, as one of my teachers, Sharon Salzberg, says, we can always begin again. So maybe that's just something to keep in mind, because a lot of us will be doing resolutions and all kinds of things for New Year's. And frankly, last year I made a lot of big changes in my life that stuck because they weren't resolutions. They were things I had started to work on in the middle of the summer and, kind of continued with through the year. And, they've continued to bear fruit. So, plant the seeds, water the tree, watch the tree grow. Eventually it'll bear fruit, but, don't pick the unripe fruit because it doesn't taste very good, right? You go to the grocery store and you buy that unripe fruit and you're like, why couldn't they just let it sit there for a little bit longer? Because a real juicy peach is so much better than some hard, dry peach that might look perfect on the outside and may still have cost you, a couple bucks, but frankly isn't very satisfying. So sometimes we just need to give things time. One of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about today was something that a friend of mine this morning said, which I thought was just such a great little saying. He said, yeah, I'm learning to make right mistakes. Right mistakes, meaning my right hand, my left hand. Right mistakes, meaning right mistakes, good mistakes. And what does that really mean? How can a mistake be right? And I think that a lot of us have had experiences where we recognize that we are in a place where we're trying to shift our behavior, shift and alter exactly how we have been doing things, but we're not 100% sure what is ahead of us or what the right thing to do is. So we often don't do anything because we're afraid, and we cling to our old habit patterns, even if they've caused us suffering in the past. We sort of, would rather do that which we know as opposed to check out some new territory or some new terrain. But this idea of right mistakes gives us an opportunity to really kind of see it as, hey, we are on a path moving towards sort of the North Star, right? We're going in a direction for a reason. We really want to keep our eyes on the prize. And the foundation of what a right mistake might be some of these universal principles that are often found in our, in our legal system, in a lot of our even religious systems, and a lot of our spiritual tenets or practices that have to do really with sort of a virtuous life. And I don't mean virtuous in the sense of being untouched or pure in some puritanical way. I mean virtuous in the sense of right actions and a being that's grounded and rooted in a sort of ethics and sense of morality that oftentimes, especially here in the West, when we are overwhelmed with choices and we are given so many choices and there are so many loopholes and things that we can do that may not ultimately be seen on the outside. For example, lots of tax loopholes out there that get exploited. Sometimes we take that extra cookie or piece of cake or whatever it is that we're not supposed to. I remember in grade school, I stole some change out of my teacher's desk, and I thought nobody would notice. And I had a habit of taking $2 bills out of my grandfather's cabinet or whatever. And clearly these are not indictable offenses, but there's still ways of trying to skirt around something without kind of being upfront about it. And as adults, we all, have, I'm sure, confronted ways in which we have been a little bit less virtuous, if you will. But this idea of right mistakes is kind of inviting us to do something a little different. It's saying, okay, before I used to try to maybe take what wasn't mine because I felt like I was owed or I deserved something or I needed something more than what I had in front of me. And I want to really recognize and pay attention to that part of me that's saying, hey, I need a little something here. I deserve to be treated well. Whether it's an extra cookie, whether it's an extra couple of bucks, whether it's whatever it is that isn't exactly ours to take. But right mistakes means that, we have this framework where we've agreed to sort of not steal, not harm. In a Buddhist philosophy, it also includes the, abstaining from intoxicants like alcohol and drugs, and then sexual misconduct, which means, not being very mindful of the kinds of relationships that we engage in physically so that we don't, hurt anyone's feelings, including our own, and that we're able to be truthful and honest in those regards, and then some. So how does this apply in terms of right mistakes? It means that you have this framework of sort of right action or virtuous action or an idea of being sort of morally or ethically inclined at a certain level, even though we might be able to get away with more than that. We look at ourselves in our lives and we say, okay, well, is it working for me? Is this getting away with it really working for me? How deep is my conscience, right? How deep is my conscience on this? And do I just want to kind of skirt around the issue and, sort of superficially get something that looks good? Or do I really want to have rigorous self-honesty, try and go a little bit deeper, be willing to confront the fact that we may fail if we do try something and make a mistake, but that it was a mistake made with the best of intentions. So, for example, if you need to have a conversation with someone, but you avoid having that conversation with someone because it's uncomfortable, sometimes if you go in with that framework of right intention and non-harming speech, which means that what you say is truthful and kind and generous, meaning that you don't have to just be blunt and say the truth just because you know that somebody needs to hear it or you think that somebody needs to hear it, because maybe it's going to hurt their feelings. That's hard sometimes. From time to time, occasionally, people do need to hear things that can be difficult to hear, but then you question, okay, well, is it the right time to share that kind of information with the person? So this whole idea of right mistakes might be, all right, I've decided that instead of just brushing this under the rug all the time, I'm going to actually try to confront the situation and have a conversation with this person. But as a framework, I'm going to have an intention of well-being for myself and the other person. And I'm going to have an intention of being able to really want to make the connection greater, not split it apart. So I'm really going to want to make sure that whatever it is that I do is kind, helpful, generous, charitable, and in a way furthers the dialogue between us, so that I'm not only the one who's so sage and can give advice, but that I'm also open to receiving it. In the practice that I talked about a couple weeks ago called deep listening, we learn how to just zip it and also hear what it is that the other person has to say. And when I say hear, I mean we're listening not only with our ears, but we're really listening with our eyes, with our body, with our senses. And we're actually feeling and absorbing some of what that other person is sharing, what their energy is telling us. Even if the words are saying one thing, sometimes the body and their presence is saying something else. Usually when someone's relaxed and when they're not, and when they're just trying to be nice and when they're not. So back to this idea of right mistakes, I just want to invite you to consider whether or not it's worth it to just kind of try and see, what is your ethical framework? What's your sort of virtuous, moral, ethical framework for yourself in terms of moving forward into this new year, this new day, this new week, this new hour, this new moment? We can always begin again. And as we try to do that, can our sort of background, sort of that hum in the background, be an intention of right living, virtuous action, moral consideration, ethics, kindness, something that is enhancing in a way that if we're just sort of walking around and, thinking about the world in a way of what can I get away with today, as opposed to really if I'm rigorous self-honesty, if I'm practicing rigorous self-honesty, what would be the best thing to do here? And see if we can't try that. It can be tough, but this whole concept of making right mistakes means that if and when we misstep, it's not really a misstep. We just learn, we take a deep breath, and we get back on the horse, because that horse is our life. We only have one life to live. It's more than a soap opera. And, it really is an invitation to take stock and see where we're at and where we might want to go. And know that wherever we are, that the only way that we can begin to make any modifications at all is if we start by accepting ourselves exactly as we are, warts and all. Because underneath all that superficial stuff like warts, inside is our true nature. And that is luminous and expansive and generous and open-hearted, and we each have that. We forget sometimes, and we get contracted in fear and in judgment. So I would invite you to just open up, try a few right mistakes, see what happens. Bye.